the craziest soldiers of World War II. Most people think World War II soldiers were just regular guys following orders, but some of them were absolutely out of their minds. I'm talking about soldiers who charged into battle with swords, survived impossible odds, and did things that sound like they came straight out of a movie. These aren't your typical war heroes. These are the psychopaths, the madmen, and the absolute legends who made the enemy question reality itself. World War II was the deadliest conflict in human history. Over 70 million people died. Entire cities were destroyed. Countries were torn apart. But in the middle of all that chaos and destruction, there were individuals who stood out. Not because they were the best shots or the smartest tacticians, but because they were completely insane in the best possible way. Today, I'm going to tell you about the craziest soldiers who fought in World War II. These are real stories about real people who did things that defy logic. Some of them survived against impossible odds. Others took risks that should have gotten them killed 100 times over. And all of them proved that sometimes, being a little bit crazy is exactly what you need to win a war. So let's jump right into it. When you think about World War II, you probably imagine soldiers hiding in trenches, following strict orders, and fighting by the book. And yeah, that's how most of it went down. But war has a way of bringing out the extremes in people. It pushes them to their limits and sometimes beyond. The thing is, conventional tactics don't always work. Sometimes you need someone who's willing to break every rule, ignore every warning, and do something so crazy that the enemy doesn't see it coming. That's where these soldiers come in. The challenge they faced wasn't just surviving the war. It was doing it in a way that nobody thought was possible. They had to be brave, sure, but they also had to be willing to cross lines that normal people wouldn't even think about crossing. Let's start with Jack Churchill. This guy is probably the craziest soldier on this entire list, and that's saying something. Jack Churchill, also known as Mad Jack, was a British soldier who fought in World War II with a longbow and a Scottish broadsword. Yeah, you heard that right. While everyone else was using rifles and machine guns, this absolute madman was running around with medieval weapons. But here's the thing. He wasn't just carrying them for show. He actually used them. In fact, Jack Churchill has the last recorded kill with a longbow in war. He shot a German soldier with an arrow in France in 1940. Imagine being that German soldier. You're in the middle of World War II, surrounded by modern weapons and technology, and you get taken out by a guy with a bow and arrow. That's humiliating. But it gets better. Mad Jack didn't just use a bow, he also carried a sword into battle. And he used it too. During a raid in Norway, he charged at the enemy with his sword drawn, leading his men into combat like he was in a medieval battle. He even played the bagpipes before going into battle. The bagpipes, in the middle of a war zone. His reasoning, he said, any officer who goes into action without his sword is improperly dressed. This man had style, I'll give him that. But Mad Jack wasn't just crazy. He was also incredibly effective. He led multiple successful commando raids, captured dozens of enemy soldiers, and survived situations that should have killed him. At one point, he was captured by the Germans and sent to a concentration camp. Most people would have given up at that point. Not Mad Jack. He escaped. Twice. The first time, he got recaptured. The second time, he walked over 100 miles through enemy territory until he found Allied forces. When the war in Europe ended, Jack Churchill was disappointed. He said, "If it wasn't for those damn Yanks, we could have kept the war going another 10 years. This guy wanted the war to keep going. That's how crazy he was. Now let's talk about Audie Murphy. This man is the definition of a one-man army. Audie Murphy was an American soldier who became the most decorated combat soldier of World War II. He received every military combat award for valor available from the U.S. Army. He also received awards from France and Belgium. By the time the war ended, he had killed over 240 enemy soldiers, and he did most of it while being severely outnumbered. But the craziest story about Audie Murphy happened in France in 1945. His unit was under attack by German forces. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Most of his men were either dead or wounded. The situation was hopeless. Any normal person would have retreated, but Audie Murphy wasn't normal. Instead of retreating, he climbed onto a burning tank destroyer that was about to explode. He grabbed the machine gun and started firing at the Germans. Alone. He stood on top of that burning vehicle for over an hour, holding off an entire company of German soldiers. We're talking about 250 enemy soldiers, and he was just one guy on a burning tank. The Germans tried everything to take him down. They fired rifles, machine guns, and artillery at him. But Murphy just kept firing back. He was hit in the leg but didn't stop. The tank destroyer was on fire beneath him, ready to blow up at any second. But he didn't care, he just kept shooting. Eventually, the Germans gave up and retreated. Murphy had single-handedly held off an entire company. When he finally climbed down from the tank, he organized his remaining men and led a counterattack. This guy got shot, stood on an exploding tank for an hour, and then immediately went on the offensive. That's not normal. That's crazy. After the war, Murphy became an actor and starred in his own biographical film. But he never fully recovered from what he experienced. He suffered from what we now call PTSD for the rest of his life. The crazy thing is, despite everything he went through, he said he would do it all over again. Next up is Lyudmila Pavlichenko. She's not just one of the craziest soldiers of World War II. She's also one of the deadliest. Lyudmila was a Soviet sniper who killed 309 enemy soldiers during the war. That makes her the most successful female sniper in history. But what makes her crazy isn't just the number of kills. It's how calm and calculated she was about it. Lyudmila grew up in Ukraine and learned to shoot as a teenager. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union, she volunteered for the army. At first, they didn't want to give her a rifle. They thought she should be a nurse. But she insisted, and eventually they gave her a chance. She proved herself immediately by killing 2 enemy soldiers on her first day. After that, they couldn't deny her talent. She became a sniper and was sent to the front lines. For the next few years, she hunted German soldiers with cold precision. She specialized in taking out enemy snipers. Whenever the Germans sent their best shooters to take her down, she would hunt them instead. She killed 36 enemy snipers during the war. These were the best marksmen the Germans had, and she picked them off one by one. But here's what makes her crazy. She didn't just see it as killing. She saw it as a job. She kept track of her kills like someone keeping score in a game. She was completely detached from the emotional weight of what she was doing. When asked how she felt about killing so many people, she said it was necessary. She didn't lose sleep over it. She didn't question it. She just did her job. Lyudmila was eventually wounded by mortar fire and pulled from the front lines. After that, she went on a publicity tour in the United States and Canada to raise support for the Soviet war effort. She met Eleanor Roosevelt and gave speeches to thousands of people. She became a symbol of Soviet strength. But the whole time, she was probably thinking about getting back to the battlefield. After the war, she became a historian and trained other snipers. She lived a relatively quiet life, but she never forgot what she did during the war, and she never regretted it. Now let's talk about Simo Häyhä, also known as the White Death. This guy makes Lyudmila look tame. Simo Häyhä was a Finnish sniper who fought against the Soviet Union during the Winter War. In just 100 days, he killed over 500 enemy soldiers. Some estimates put the number even higher at over 700. That's an average of 5 to 7 kills per day, for over 3 months straight. That's not just impressive, that's terrifying. But what makes Simo Häyhä truly crazy is how he operated. He fought in freezing temperatures, often in snow that was waist-deep. He would hide in the snow for hours, completely motionless, waiting for the perfect shot. He didn't use a scope on his rifle because the glint from the glass could give away his position. He relied on iron sights. That means he had to be even more accurate than other snipers. The Soviets were terrified of him. They called him the White Death because he blended into the snow perfectly. They sent entire units to hunt him down. They used artillery strikes to try to kill him. They even sent their own snipers to take him out. Nothing worked. Simo just kept killing. At one point, the Soviets were so desperate to stop him that they launched a massive artillery barrage on the area where they thought he was hiding. They destroyed everything in the area, but Simo survived. He just moved to a different location and kept shooting. Eventually, the Soviets got lucky. An explosive round hit near Simo and sent shrapnel into his face. It destroyed his jaw and knocked him unconscious. Most people would have died from an injury like that, but Simo survived. He woke up 11 days later when the war ended. After the war, he recovered from his injuries and lived a quiet life as a farmer. He became a national hero in Finland. When asked about his kills, he said he was just doing what needed to be done. He didn't brag about it. He didn't glorify it. He just accepted it as part of who he was. Simo Häyhä died in 2002 at the age of 96. He lived a long, peaceful life after the war, but the legend of the White Death will never be forgotten. Let's move on to Adrian Carton de Wiart. This man was so tough that he makes action movie heroes look soft. Adrian Carton de Wiart was a British officer who fought in 3 major wars: the Boer War, World War I, and World War II. Over the course of his military career, he was shot in the face, head, stomach, ankle, leg, hip, and ear. He lost an eye and a hand. He survived multiple plane crashes. He was captured by enemy forces and escaped. And through all of that, he said he enjoyed every minute of it. Let me repeat that. This man got shot in the face, lost an eye, lost a hand, and said he had the time of his life. During World War I, Adrian was shot in the face. The bullet destroyed his left eye. Most people would have gone home after that, not Adrian. He ripped off the bandages and went back to fighting. He said the eye was bothering him anyway. Later, he lost several fingers on his left hand during battle. The doctors wanted to amputate them properly, but Adrian got impatient. He ripped the fingers off himself and went back to the front lines. This man performed self-amputation because he didn't want to wait for a doctor. During World War II, Adrian was in his 60s. Most people that age are thinking about retirement. Adrian was jumping out of planes and leading commando raids. At one point, his plane crashed into the ocean. He survived the crash, swam to shore, and was captured by Italian forces. He spent 2 years as a prisoner of war. He tried to escape 5 times. They eventually moved him to a higher security prison because he wouldn't stop trying to escape. When the war ended, Adrian was released. He was 65 years old and had been through more than most soldiers experience in a lifetime. But he didn't complain. In fact, in his autobiography, he wrote, "Frankly, I had enjoyed the war." This man enjoyed getting shot, blown up, and captured. That's not bravery. That's insanity. Adrian Carton de Wiart lived to be 83 years old. He survived everything the world threw at him and died peacefully in his sleep. He's proof that sometimes being too crazy to die is a real strategy. Now let's talk about Aníbal Milhais. This guy is less known than the others, but his story is just as crazy. Aníbal Milhais was a Portuguese soldier who fought in World War I. Portugal wasn't a major player in the war, so Portuguese soldiers don't get a lot of attention. But Aníbal deserves to be remembered because of what he did during the Battle of La Lies in 1918. During the battle, Aníbal's unit was ordered to retreat. The Germans were advancing fast, and the Portuguese forces were being overrun. Everyone was pulling back, but Aníbal stayed behind. Alone. He set up his machine gun and started firing at the advancing German soldiers. For hours, Aníbal held off the German advance by himself. He killed countless enemy soldiers and slowed their progress enough to allow his fellow soldiers to escape. He was completely alone, surrounded by enemies with no support. But he didn't run. He just kept firing. Eventually, he ran out of ammunition. At that point, most people would have surrendered. But Aníbal didn't surrender. He picked up his gear and started walking back to friendly lines. He had to cross miles of enemy-occupied territory, but he made it. When he finally arrived, his commanding officers thought he was dead. They were shocked to see him alive. For his actions, Aníbal was awarded the highest military honor in Portugal. He became a national hero, but he never bragged about what he did. He just said he was doing his duty. Aníbal Milhais lived to be 77 years old. He spent the rest of his life as a humble farmer, but in Portugal. He's remembered as Soldier Millions because he was worth 1 million soldiers on that day. Next is Desmond Doss. Now, Desmond is a different kind of crazy. He didn't kill anyone. In fact, he refused to even carry a gun, but he still saved 75 soldiers during one of the bloodiest battles of World War II. Desmond Doss was an American combat medic who served in the Pacific Theater. He was a Seventh-day Adventist, which meant he followed strict religious beliefs. He believed killing was wrong, so he refused to carry a weapon. When he enlisted, the other soldiers mocked him. They thought he was a coward. They didn't think he would survive. But Desmond wasn't a coward. He was just committed to his beliefs. And during the Battle of Okinawa, he proved that you don't need a gun to be a hero. The Battle of Okinawa was brutal. American forces were trying to take a cliff called Hacksaw Ridge. The Japanese defenders were dug in and fighting to the death. Hundreds of American soldiers were killed or wounded trying to take the ridge. Desmond's unit was part of the attack. They made it to the top of the ridge, but they were met with intense fire. Soldiers were being shot and blown apart all around him. Eventually, the Americans were forced to retreat, but Desmond stayed behind. While everyone else was running for their lives, Desmond ran toward the wounded. He dragged them to the edge of the cliff and lowered them down using a rope. One by one, he saved them. He didn't have a weapon to defend himself. He was completely exposed to enemy fire. But he didn't care. He just kept saving people. Over the course of several hours, Desmond saved 75 soldiers. 75 by himself, under constant enemy fire. Every time he lowered a soldier down the cliff, he would pray, "Please, God, let me get one more." And every time he did. Eventually, Desmond was wounded himself. He was hit by shrapnel from a grenade. But even then, he refused to be evacuated until all the other wounded soldiers were taken care of first. This man was bleeding out and still putting others before himself. Desmond Doss became the first conscientious objector to receive the Medal of Honor. He proved that you don't have to kill to be a hero. You just have to care more about others than you care about yourself. Desmond died in 2006 at the age of 87. His story was turned into a movie called Hacksaw Ridge, but no movie can fully capture how insane his actions were. This man saved 75 lives without firing a single shot. That's not just crazy. That's miraculous. Now let's talk about Yogendra Singh Yadav. This guy is still alive today, which is crazy because he should have died a dozen times. Yogendra Singh Yadav was an Indian soldier who fought in the Kargil War in 1999. Technically, this isn't World War II, but the level of insanity is too good not to mention. During the war, India and Pakistan were fighting over a region in the Himalayas. Indian forces were trying to capture a mountain peak called Tiger Hill. Yogendra was part of a special forces unit tasked with climbing the mountain and taking out enemy bunkers. The climb itself was nearly impossible. The mountain was covered in ice and snow, and the cliffs were almost vertical. But Yogendra and his team started climbing. Halfway up the mountain, they were spotted by Pakistani forces. The enemy opened fire. Bullets were raining down on them. Most of Yogendra's team was killed, but Yogendra kept climbing. He was shot 3 times, once in the shoulder, once in the arm, and once in the leg. He was bleeding heavily and losing consciousness, but he didn't stop. He kept climbing. When he finally reached the top, he was greeted by enemy soldiers with machine guns. At this point, Yogendra had been shot 3 times and was barely able to stand. But he didn't retreat. He charged at the enemy bunkers and took them out with grenades, single-handedly. After destroying the bunkers, Yogendra collapsed. His commanding officers thought he was dead. They even announced his death and recommended him for India's highest military honor posthumously. But Yogendra wasn't dead. He was just unconscious. When he woke up in the hospital, he was told that he had been declared dead. He had to prove that he was still alive to get his award corrected. Yogendra Singh Yadav is the youngest person to ever receive India's highest military honor, and he's still alive today. This man got shot 3 times, climbed a mountain, destroyed enemy bunkers, and survived. That's not luck. That's pure insanity. Let's move on to Franz Stigler and Charlie Brown. This story is different because it involves both sides of the war. Franz Stigler was a German fighter pilot. Charlie Brown was an American bomber pilot. During a mission over Germany, Charlie's bomber was heavily damaged. His plane was falling apart. Half of his crew was dead or wounded. The tail gunner was dead, slumped over his gun. The plane was barely flying. Franz Stigler was ordered to shoot down the bomber. He flew up alongside it to finish the job. But when he got close enough to see inside, he saw the devastation. He saw the dead crew members. He saw Charlie desperately trying to keep the plane in the air. And he made a decision that could have gotten him executed. Instead of shooting the bomber down, Franz decided to escort it to safety. He flew alongside Charlie's plane, guiding it toward Allied territory. He even waved at Charlie to get his attention. Charlie thought he was hallucinating. He couldn't believe a German pilot was helping him. Franz escorted the bomber all the way to the North Sea. Once they were over Allied territory, Franz saluted Charlie and flew away. He risked his life and his career to save an enemy pilot. After the war, Charlie never forgot what Franz did. He spent years trying to find the German pilot who saved his life. Finally, in 1990, he found him. Franz was living in Canada. The two men met and became close friends. They remained friends until they both died in 2008, within months of each other. This story is crazy because it shows that even in the middle of a brutal war, humanity can still exist. Franz Stigler didn't have to save Charlie Brown. He could have shot him down and gone home a hero. But he chose mercy instead. That takes a different kind of courage. So what makes these soldiers the craziest of World War II? It's not just that they survived. It's not just that they killed a lot of enemies or performed incredible feats. It's that they did things that normal people would never even think about doing. They charged into battle with medieval weapons. They stood on burning tanks and fought off hundreds of enemies. They climbed mountains after being shot 3 times. They saved 75 lives without firing a gun. They showed mercy to their enemies when they could have killed them. These soldiers weren't crazy because they were reckless. They were crazy because they refused to accept the limitations that everyone else accepted. They saw impossible situations and decided to do it anyway. They looked death in the face and laughed. That's what separates them from everyone else. Most soldiers followed orders and did their duty. These soldiers went beyond duty. They became legends. World War II was full of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. But these soldiers weren't ordinary. They were exceptional. They were insane. And they were absolutely incredible. From Mad Jack Churchill charging into battle with a sword and bagpipes, to Audie Murphy standing on a burning tank, to Simo Häyhä killing 500 enemies in the snow, to Adrian Carton de Wiart enjoying getting shot in the face, these soldiers proved that sometimes being crazy is exactly what you need. They didn't fight fair. They didn't play it safe. They just did what needed to be done, no matter how insane it seemed. And because of that, they changed the course of history. These stories remind us that war brings out the extremes in people. It pushes them to their limits and sometimes beyond. It shows us what humans are capable of when everything is on the line. So the next time you think about World War II, don't just think about the generals and the strategies. Think about the individuals. Think about the madmen who defied logic and did the impossible. Because without them, the war might have turned out very differently. Subscribe if you want more stories like this.